So let's go about explaining how to actually go and create a new listing on Airbnb. So this is assuming that you want to create a new listing using the content within your SuperControl account. So there are a number of stages that we go through. The first thing is to connect with Airbnb. So obviously you need to have an account with Airbnb and we just need to get connected. The next step is to validate. That means that it would ensure that all the data contained within your SuperControl properties is enough, that there's enough and you have met all the minimum requirements to create a listing on Airbnb. We would then go through the process of actually copying all the data from SuperControl across to Airbnb. We then go through a number of steps in terms of reviewing your listing to see if there are any error messages because you don't meet minimum requirements set by Airbnb. And then the last step is to confirm or publish, which basically means set that property live on Airbnb. So I'm just going to go through those steps individually, but that's just an overall process. So I'm going to show you actually a short video of a colleague that goes through the various stages of creating a new Airbnb listing using the property information you have set up within SuperControl. Now, the process does take a couple of minutes, and I obviously, for time, have shortened it. So we're going to go over how to create a new Airbnb listing using your SuperControl property that is already created. So the ways we go about doing that is heading over to Integrations, Channel Manager International, and selecting Airbnb. Here you'll see that we have a list of all of our current properties within SuperControl, and we can easily identify those that have connected with Airbnb by the presence of a listing ID. In my case, I'm going to want to connect this particular property, Airbnb Full Test, to Airbnb. So the way we go about doing that is selecting Start. When you select Start, you give the option of whether you want to create a new listing or connect to an existing listing. In our case, we want to create a new listing. When you select Create a New Listing, this will start the data transfer from SuperControl to Airbnb. You'll see that once it progresses, you may get an error code, and with this error code, it will tell you exactly where to go ahead and fix the errors, and you can just select this link next to it. So here in the case, I'd go to Fix and select. So you see, in this case, Airbnb is requiring a minimum of 7 photos. I clearly do not. You can go ahead and fix this by going Select Fix. So I've gone ahead and added additional photos. Now I meet the minimum requirement of 7 photos. So here you go, 7th photo is uploaded. Now what I'll do is head back to my Airbnb page and I select Revalidate, and voila, it is validated. And now I have the option to go and create a listing. It is now going to go through the final stages of creating the property listing on Airbnb. So once you've gone ahead and moved your property to where it needs to be and selected yes, it will go ahead and create the property on Airbnb. So in my case, my property is found in Scotland and there are new license and compliance issues that need to be sorted out. So I'm just going to go ahead and select that. So here the listing has not completed onboarding for the following reason. You cannot publish a listing until you consent to regulatory rules for your listing. If I select that, it'll take me to my listing where I have to go ahead and start hosting. So let's go through to the next steps. In Scotland, we need to make sure that we're aware of some key laws that have been changed. So select Get Started. I understand and select Save. Once you've done that, we continue. We can go back to our property on SuperControl. So I'm here back in SuperControl. So my next step is to select Retry, which will reattempt to create the property on Airbnb. Again, select and change my property. I'm going to do that. Select Yes. We'll then continue the process. Once the creation has been approved on Airbnb side, you will see that your integration page will reload and you'll have your property with its reference number on the left, and it will have a listing ID present here within this bar now. That was just showing you the process. Okay, so now obviously when creating this new listing on Airbnb, you actually might be prompted to complete some Airbnb default settings. So what I'm going to do is just focus on a couple of these. Basically, and the reason being is that Airbnb has made notable updates on how you can position your properties on its platform. So specifically, these features are basically designed to enhance your visibility and maximize your booking. So it really is, it's a key thing to do, and it really does make sense. So on the left-hand side, you've got your listing ID here on the right, but towards the left of it, you've got your reference numbers. If you select this property reference number, it will redirect you to the Airbnb data requirements that are actually required to create a listing. So I'm just going to select that. And what will happen is that a new window will open up and you'll see that you've got information that is specific to Airbnb and it's all categorized according to the tab names. So you'll see there's basic details, amenities, description, booking settings, rates, and availability. What happens is that within each of these tabs, there's some absolutely mandatory stuff, and those are the things that are italicized with this red asterisk. Those are the things that you must, and then the others are optional for you to set in. So say, for example, you just need to go through each of them. You'll see there's a drop-down button, select it, and you can just select what type of property group is it, and then the housing, if it's a house, a chalet, etc., and is the listing type going to be an entire home or only partial access, for example. Those are just examples of what you need to go through. Now you'd need to work through each tab and obviously ensure that each of the missing information is allocated. But there are some minimum requirements that I wanted to just work through. The first thing is description, then I'll chat about photos and then amenities. So just to start off with in terms of your description, I mentioned that Airbnb is focusing on what they call listing optimization. And basically this is to better structure the appearance of their listings. So in SuperControl under the Airbnb data, specifically the description tab, you'll see that they display each category under more specific headers. And these are the ones you'll see that we've got, for example, listing description. This is just a generic one that gives information about your description, but they've actually then itemized it out into more subdivisions. So we've got the space basically where you should provide information about what makes your space unique. We've then got guest access, and basically this is where you would tell your guests if you'll be available to offer help during their stay. Then there would be the neighborhood, letting the guest know about what your neighborhood is like and what makes it unique, maybe the activities available nearby. Getting around further down, and this tells guests basically if your listing is close to public transport or if it's far from it. This is also where you would maybe mention your parking options that you've got available, for example. There's another two things, which is house rules. House rule, this is where you'd list the rules of your property, basically what you'd expect of the guest. And then there's a last option called other things to note. And this is where you'd let guests know about further notable details that may actually affect their stay. So these are just listing details that you need to add within it. So go in it and add these. You'll see that there are character limitations. So for example, the listing is 500 characters, but the rest of them down below them do not have a character limitation. And just importantly to let you note, obviously I've spoken about the character limitation, but you cannot put in phone numbers, email addresses, or URLs within this content. That's also very important, and those details will not be transmitted through. So let's quickly chat about amenities. Now, amenities in terms of Airbnb, they require a minimum of 5 amenities in order to actually create a listing. So you need to go ahead and allocate an amenity to your properties first if you haven't already, and these amenities need to be mapped across to the equivalent Airbnb amenity. So maybe you call it a fridge, they would call it a refrigerator. So you just have to map it across to what the equivalent is on it. And basically you go ahead and tick which ones actually are available and within your property. On a side note, I just wanted to let you know that Airbnb have made recent improvements with regards to accessibility amenities. They obviously recognize that they weren't effectively designed for people with disabilities. So for example, they used to have a single solution which was wheelchair accessible. They went and they chatted to people with disabilities and they realized that they were not catering to all disabilities, and so they have identified a larger set of features. So these would be things like that accessible height bed, step-free access to home. You can see all of them listed here, for example. And we have the option within SuperControl that allows you to set up accessibility amenities. Accessibility amenities do need to have a photo and they need to be tagged for each of these amenities. Just make sure that if you are going to use these amenities, I would suggest that you add it on later. First, start off with your normal amenities, get your property set up, and then later on you can come in and add accessible amenities into it. Also on the topic of photos, Airbnb also have a minimum of 7 photos in order to create a listing, and there's also a requirement that they have to be 800 by 500 pixels, which is actually quite small. Obviously, these would already be within your property photos. I showed you in my demonstration of that video where I only had 6, so I had to go and add in a 7th one, for example, and how you can use those to create the listing. Right, so I've now chatted about creating a new listing, but what happens if you have a listing already present on Airbnb and you now want to connect it to your SuperControl account? To establish this connection between SuperControl and Airbnb, in the past, you'd send us a ticket request basically and give us the Airbnb listing ID. You'd then wait for us to go ahead and action it on your behalf. We've made changes within our integration where now you can take that control and you can connect your existing listings independently whenever you want, even if it's in the middle of the night. To actually connect with this existing property, you need to first of all connect with Airbnb, which was the standard for either integration that you select. And so connecting is basically signing into your Airbnb account. The next step is to select to connect to an existing listing. You then have to go and select the corresponding Airbnb property that you want. You then select what type of synchronization you actually want between the property and the SuperControl. You've then got a validation step, which obviously ensures it basically checks that you have pricing and availability within your SuperControl property settings. And then you have to confirm it and that connection goes live. So we replace any of your availability and rates with those that are found within your SuperControl account. But the most important thing that I wanted to chat about is in terms of the synchronization. You'll be asked what type of sync you want to connect with. The first suggestion I'd always make is select a rate and availability only first. And the reason being is that it will only link your rates and availability within your SuperControl account. However, if you select full content, that means it will be changed from a rates and availability to full content, where we will take all the photos within your SuperControl account and replace the ones on your Airbnb ones with the ones that are in your SuperControl account. So the suggestion is always do rates and availability first. And if you do decide at a later stage that you want to upgrade to what we call a full integration, you would go into your SuperControl account, make sure that all of the photos were up to date, all the description details, etc., were all up to date, and then transfer and change over to a full content. And then that way, all of that content will be changed over to whatever is within your SuperControl account and makes life just a little bit easier. So when in doubt, always recommend connecting user rates and availability connection first when linking to existing channel listings in SuperControl. And then once you've trialed that rates and availability connection and that you're happy that all of your default integration property settings have been inserted and they're correct, then change over the sync level. Right. So in SuperControl, if you want to go ahead and connect to an existing listing within Airbnb, the first thing to do is to head to Channel Manager, which is under Integrations, select International, and select your Airbnb platform. This is assuming you've already gone ahead and connected to your Airbnb platform and logged in with them. In this case, I've got a list of all my different properties and I want to go ahead and connect this particular property called Group Master and connect it with an existing listing on Airbnb. So the ways you go about doing that is select the Start button next to the corresponding property listing. When you select Start, a new window opens, and this is where you have the option to onboard this particular property. Here we have the options to connect to existing listing, which is what I want to do because the listing is present on Airbnb already. When you select that, what will happen is a new window will open and you'll see your account number will be listed. So this is the account that we are connecting with. If you have more than one account, you have the option to change it here. You then go ahead and select the corresponding listing that this particular property is called on Airbnb. So in my case, it's SuperControl Test RNA. Once you select that, we have the options to connect different ways. So in my case, I'm going to connect via a rates and availability. This means that I'm only going to sync pricing and availability, and all other listing content will be managed on my Airbnb platform. The next step is just to select Connect. When you select Connect, you'll see you'll go through a number of validation steps, and it will tell you the progress and status of thereof. Once everything is finalized and all those checks are checked, and you'll see that once it's finalized, the property listing here, it will have a corresponding listing ID as per your Airbnb, and it will be toggled on. Within this option, you have got a number of Airbnb management tools. So here on the right-hand side, this is the Visit the Listing on Airbnb, and you'll see if I select it, it will open up the page, the actual listing page on Airbnb for yourselves. There is also the Listing Admin tool. This tool will show you what your API response and whether the approval status and what sort of sync level you have got with it. So whether it is a rates and availability of full integration, for example. You also have options to look at your listing management. So here you have the options to update or even disconnect your listing. So if you decide you no longer want to connect via SuperControl, you just select Disconnect Listing.